Okay, so we are recording our presentation now, and again, I'll make it available on YouTube so that you can watch it again later. But again, welcome to our Intacct Cloud Bytes, dimension-driven financials. It's the first presentation that we hope to have on a regular monthly basis, giving you an educational opportunity for Intacct. Now, I'm going to show my screen here, and I will be honest and admit that I'm having a little bit of an issue with PowerPoint today. Hopefully it won't be a big deal. Okay, so Intacct Cloud Bytes, dimension-driven financials. So we're going to talk about dimensions today within the Intacct application. And first thing that I want to share with you is that if you have any questions, if you need to alert me to anything, if you're unable to see the screen, if you're unable to hear, or if you just have questions, you guys are on mute for now. We'll open it up towards the end for questions if you would like, but you are on mute for now. And if you have any questions or need to let me know of anything, you will have a questions box and you will have a chat box within your GoToWebinar screen, typically on the right-hand side of your screen. So feel free to put something in either of those and let me know that you need assistance. So today's agenda, I'm going to go through a quick introduction. We're going to talk about dimensions, why you should care about dimensions, how you can use them, how you can report on them. We'll do a recap, and then we'll discuss the next Cloud Byte. And we are going to actually look into the Intacct system today. It's not going to be a bunch of PowerPoints and things like that. We're actually going to go in, we're going to see the system, and we're going to talk about things as we go through this. So I'm not going to bore you with a lot of PowerPoints, but I do want to have them just to kind of guide what we go through. Okay? So, introductions. Massey Consulting, most of you know us, founded in 2002. We're CPAs and accountants, numerous technical certifications. We are a Intacct Premier Partner. For those of you that did not know, we were awarded the Premier Partner status a few months ago, one of the initial 11 in the Partner Channel program to be a Premier Partner. We also did make President's Club in 2014, so we were one of 9 organizations to make President's Club. And we are a Microsoft Gold Partner for Dynamics ERP. We're ranked in the top 300 small businesses in the Southeast USA, and we regularly contribute to blogs such as the NCA CPA and others. A little bit about me, why I'm here in front of you. I was founded in 1970. A little bit of a joke there. I've got a bachelor's degree in accounting, a CPA license holder in North Carolina since 1994, Intacct certified, GP certified, SQL certified. My wife tells me I'm certifiable. Guest speaker at Intacct events and blog for the NCA CPA. And don't tell my wife I said that on the presentation. So, but that's a little bit about me and a little bit about our company. So let's jump right into the heart of the matter here, really. What are dimensions? So when I was first learning Intacct, and with the concept or the actual word, really, of dimensions was introduced to me, many things came to mind. I'm a science fiction fan, so everything from Jules Verne to all other types of science fiction came to mind with other dimensions and portals and things like that. Of course, you also had dimensions of boxes, as we see here, with width and length and height and different things like that. But a dimension can be many things. But typically, if you really think about it, a dimension is a characteristic. So it's a characteristic, it's a width, it's a length, it's a height of a box. It's a alternative dimension in a science fiction novel. It's some type of characteristic of an object. And that really holds true in the Intacct application as well. So if we look at Merriam-Webster and look for their definition of a dimension, It's the length, width, height, or depth of something, the amount or number of things that something affects or influences, or it's a part of something. To me, you're really talking about a couple of key words in here. You're talking about measurement in the first piece, and you're talking about part in the last piece. Okay? So you're talking about a measurement. A dimension in Intacct is a measurement of a transaction. You write a check out of the system, you cut a check for $1,000. $500 of that is for the sales department expense. $500 of that is for the support department expense. The department is a measurement. It's a dimension, but it's a measurement of a transaction. It's a part of a transaction. You've got someone that's entering their time and they're working on several different projects. The project is the dimension, but it's a measurement of their time. They've put in an hour on this project and this task, and they've put in 45 minutes on this project and task. Those are dimensions within the Intacct system. Okay. Intacct's dimension capability offers an entirely new way to track and report on financial and operational data while simplifying your chart of accounts. And that's taken, we'll admit, that's taken directly from Intacct's website, but I think it's a good base explanation of what the Intacct Dimensions allow you to do. Track different aspects of your business, tag transactions to those particular aspects, and yet not have to grow exponentially your chart of accounts. Again, from the Intacct website, Intacct Dimensions allow you to simplify your chart of accounts, track your business like never before, and streamline your reporting and save time. Now we'll jump into these for a couple of minutes more explanation as we get inside the program, but basically you break free from the traditional legacy system aspect of having segments tied together in one long string to having multiple independent tags that you can use to determine or to tag really your transactions into certain buckets. Okay. Quite simply stated, a dimension is a tag. As I said, it's a tag that you can apply to transactions. Departments, cost centers, locations, entities, lines of business, classes, projects, events, sponsors, etc., etc., etc. Anything that you want to track within your business, you can set up a dimension to track that. Okay. Each entity, each organization has up to 13 dimensions that can be used in the standard base product. 8 of those can be renamed or repurposed to suit your needs. And so you could take those, you could rename it, for example, to funds and grants and programs if you're a nonprofit. If you're a professional service company, perhaps you wanted to track by projects. If you are a distribution business, maybe you have lines of business. You have product lines that you want to track things by. Maybe you want to look at cost centers, locations. One of the best ones of an Intacct, or best ways to use an Intacct dimension, is actually in a multi-entity environment where you have one company that owns multiple different subsidiaries underneath it. The entity dimension is really a fantastic way to have intercompany transactions and just to be able to track those multiple subsidiaries underneath the entity and being able to report on those, being able to get financial statements out, being able to look across entities for payables and receivables. different things like that. It's really a fantastic way to handle multiple entities. But it also works really well for programs and sponsors and events and classes, things like that. You're a training center. You've got classes and courses that you might want to track registrants for and dollars, and possibly you publish books or things like that. Lots of different things that you can use an Intacct dimension for, and really be able to report on that and pull that data back out of the system and transform your business, not just from a standpoint of reporting on a standard P&L, but really getting down into the weeds and seeing how having that type of information can transform your business. So, all right. So, how or why do dimensions matter? And I chose this picture because this gentleman sort of reminds me of a traditional legacy accounting system. And if you'll think about the box that he's in, that's the methodology for handling a chart of accounts in a traditional accounting system, and you're boxed in on that. If you take even one of the other products that we sell, Dynamics GP, for example, it's great inside of Dynamics GP that you can have 66 characters and you can have 10 different segments, and that's fantastic. Gives you the ability to have a really detailed chart of accounts. But if you think about it, what does that do? Anytime you want to add a new product line that you want to do analysis on, anytime you want to have a new project that you want to really do some financial analysis on, if you wanted to track those publications, those courses, those funds, those grants, those programs, that has to be in that traditional chart of accounts segment. And when you get into adding new funds, new programs, new courses, classes, events, things of that nature, you're really looking at having a tremendously large chart of accounts. Let's say you do 20 courses a year and you've got 40 accounts of each. That's 800 accounts that you would add each year. If you're in the system for 5 years, that's 4,000. If you increase business, if you're doing different departments, if you've got different types of courses and you want to analyze those, you could be looking at 10, 20,000 accounts easily. So the dimensional concept inside of Intacct really gives you a lot of freedom and a lot of flexibility with how you structure your business and how you are able to report on things. And that's really the key to any accounting system, right? I mean, there's no need to put the data in the system if you can't get the reports back out that you want. That's a belief I've always had in doing in implementing accounting systems and helping folks select them. If we can't give you back the data in the methodology that you want it, then there's really no need to put it in, and it's not a good system for you. That's where Intacct really shines. So here's an example of breaking out of that segment trap. You could go from what you see here with the 5 different segments. First one being the natural account number, maybe departments, divisions, locations, and product lines. So you go from a long string like that where you can see, gosh, every time I add a product line, every time I add a department, if I want to rearrange, if we build a new location, oh goodness, we're going to have all of these accounts that we're going to have to create inside of our traditional system. Whereas with Intacct, dimensions are independent objects. Each one is its own separate list. So that means if I'm tracking lines of business and I've got 4 lines of business, I'm going to have a dimension called line of business, and I'm going to have 4 entries in that dimension. If I have locations and we have 6 locations, I'm going to have a dimension called location, and it's going to have 6 entries in that list. My chart of accounts may have 200 accounts in it. My departments may have 4 different departments in it. Okay, so each of these are independent pieces, and then as you enter in your transactions, which we'll see, you enter in those transactions and you're able to work with those independently. Okay, so it really breaks you out of the traditional trap of a segmented chart of accounts. So you can go from a standard income statement to profitability by project or revenue by geography with really just a few clicks of the mouse. You can learn which of the conferences you sponsor each year really have a positive ROI. You know, maybe the marketing conference that these guys go to, and you think it's a good return on your investment, but maybe it's really not. You can measure that now with Intacct. Quickly determine which new product lines are profitable. Find out how much it really cost you to open that new location. So it's not a matter of creating this whole massive chart of accounts anymore to track this new location. You create one new location in your list of locations and you're off to the races immediately. Easily produce reports for governing agencies, track those new programs you started, and learn which employees are billing the most for their services and which are falling behind. So the key to the dimensions and the ability of the dimensions and why they matter is really from a reporting standpoint, much more so than a transactional entry standpoint. Again, if you can't get the data back out, there's really no need to put it in. Intacct facilitates you putting that data in with some of the things we'll see when we get into the program, but it really facilitates you getting that data back out with the way that they've interwoven it with the financials and things like that, which is ultimately where we're going today. So using dimensions in transactions. Here's a screenshot of the GL entry screen. And as you can see here, and we'll see this screen, you've got journal entry number or journal type, date, description, all your traditional fields here. And then also down at the bottom, you've got your account number, your department, your location, and your class. And the department, location, and class are three of your dimensions that you have set up. All of these screens are customizable, so you can make them look the way that you want them to look. You can pull dimensions off. You can put dimensions on, things like that. You can rename the dimensions, as I said earlier. So you can really make the system look from a data entry standpoint the way you want it to look. For example, here's order entry, and you can see here that the dimensions are location, department, class, and line of business. Technically, item ID is a dimension as well, but location, department, class, and line of business, those are some of the more popular thought of dimensions, quote unquote. But item is also a line of business. Okay. All right, so reporting with dimensions. Let's go ahead and jump into the system and kind of show you around a little bit here. So let me hit escape, and I'm going to open up Firefox, and I'm going to go to the Intacct screen. I'm going to get logged in here real quick, and then I'll pull it down to the window. So let's do this. I had it up earlier, but I started getting a lot of different alerts and things such as that, so I wanted to close it momentarily to reset it. Okay. All right, so I'll pull this down here to where everyone can see. All right. Okay. So we are logged into Intacct. You guys should be familiar with this. And I am trying to keep an eye on questions and chat session here, and I'm not seeing anything come through so far. So seems like we're all doing well. So we're logged into Intacct, and I won't bother taking you through the navigation and all the different aspects of Intacct. We're really just going to focus on the dimensional capabilities here. So first of all, I do want to show you that when we talk about dimensions, it's important to keep in mind that if you go under company and terminology, this is where you're able to go in and rename your dimensions. So for example, really quickly, if I wanted to rename class to event and the plural name of events, save it. Now, everywhere throughout the front end of the Intacct application, I will see the word event or events as opposed to class or classes. The caveat that I will give you with this is that if you're writing custom reports or if you're doing something somehow with the back-end aspect of the application, then it still will be termed class as opposed to events. And I'll show you a little bit of that right now, or I'll show you a little bit of that shortly. Okay, so that's terminology. That's how you can rename them. And then even notice that with companies here, it still says classes as I'm looking in the menu system. But if I refresh my system, just click on the browser there, it should show events as opposed to classes. Okay. All right, so that does take effect immediately. I'll also just jump in here really quickly under departments and show you adding a department into the system. If I click over here, and it's the same process really for any dimension. You give it an ID, and these can be alphanumeric. You could put anything in there that you want, and let's say we get this to the implementation department. I can have a parent ID. I can designate a manager. I can put other things in here. And in one of our future CloudBytes sessions, we're going to talk about custom fields. And so we'll spend quite a bit of time inside of this screen adding custom fields to the dimensions, add to the transactions, things like that, that really will kick up the reporting capabilities quite a bit with those custom fields. Okay, but you can see here I've just created a whole new dimension, A500. So this is kind of where I talk about you've got the ability really to break that chart of accounts apart into multiple pieces. You're no longer tied to one long segment with six different one long number with six different segments in it with a bunch of different values, and you got to remember the numbers, and you got to remember all these different parts and pieces. You can literally within the Intacct application have all of this broken into separate pieces. You can remember either the ID or the name when you get into transactional entry, and it really makes things flow a lot better and a lot easier inside of the Intacct application as opposed to some of the other systems that are out there right now. Okay. So let's jump over. We've talked a little bit about the ability to rename them. We've looked at the different ones that are here, and you can see inside this sample company, we've got all of these different dimensions that we can work with and put in values and analyze our business by. Okay. Let's go down, and one of the easiest places to show you a transactional entry standpoint with it is in a general ledger transaction. So if I come into here and I'm just going to enter in a quick general journal here, I'm going to leave it at today's date. We're going to go into reclass assets. And I'll just skip down here to the account. I'm going to go for 1520 furniture and fixtures. And let's say this is for our new implementation department. So notice I typed an I for implementation. I don't have to remember A500. I can do that. I can type an N for New York. We'll skip the event, and I'm going to say that we're going to debit this account for 500. And let's say there was something in office supplies that we purchased that should have been classed as a fixed asset. So here's an entry that I've made, and notice here again, I've got all these independent pieces: accounts, departments, locations, and events. The event doesn't matter to me on this one, so I don't use it. But the location, the department, and the account do, so I use those. Okay. So I'm going to submit this entry. Now, I just want to go back to this screen real quick and show you that if I'm in here, and I told you you could customize these screens. So if I go up under More Actions and I go to Edit Entries Layout, notice that I've got the ability to, if I wanted to pull events off, I could pull events off. I could then take line of business, and I could put, I lost my screen just a little bit here, so let me scroll up a little. I could take line of business, and I could put it up here directly to the right of location. So I'm rearranging my screen. I'm giving myself the ability to quickly navigate through here and punch in the information that I need, and not have to hit a lot of fields I don't, see a lot of fields I don't, anything like that. And then one important key is also to check this box to apply the layout changes. Okay. All right. So, and that immediately changes this particular screen. Now, I have that capability all throughout Intacct, so whether I'm in order entry, purchasing, any of those things, and with the December 5th release, I will have that same edit layout mode in payables and in receivables. So you'll be able to go in through the entire Intacct system and truly customize the screens, the workflow, and the methodology within the Intacct application to work exactly the way that you want it to work. Okay? So, now, all that being said, I promised you dimension-driven financial statements for this particular presentation, right? So I didn't want to just jump straight into that. I think it's important to understand the concept of a dimension, how a dimension can be used, what dimensions are capable of, which we've really, truly only scratched the surface of what dimensions are capable of. And yeah, if you can't tell, I do get kind of excited when I talk about dimensions, and I know that's kind of geeky and kind of weird, but that's me. And as an accountant and a tech person, given the ability to have full control over your chart of accounts in an independent nature, and even with some of the other things you can do with custom fields, it's truly revolutionary and really exciting to be in an application that lets you do all those things. So I'll get off my soapbox. That is some of the background on dimensions. So let's talk about reporting. We've got all of our transactions in the system. Let's talk about reporting, and specifically financial reporting. Two concepts that are important to understand that sort of make a background for financial reporting, or the ability to use these dimensions in financial reporting. One is called a group. The other is called a structure. Okay. A group is subservient, or whatever you want to call it, to a structure. It's underneath a structure. Groups are comprised of dimensional values. So let's say, for example, that you have courses that you teach, and you're entering these courses into the system, and you want to track these different courses and find profitability, etc. You have some Microsoft courses, you have some Cisco courses, you have some Intacct courses, and you teach all those courses. You create groups of those different courses, and then you can use those groups in reporting. So you could say, give me a general ledger of all of my Cisco classes, and you would be able to get that general ledger report specifically looking at Cisco classes. You could say the same thing for Microsoft, etc., and of course, Intacct. So a group is a set of dimensional values. Now, a structure is either a set of dimensional values or groups. So here's where you kind of get that parent-child relationship a little bit. So think of a structure as typically, not always, but typically comprised of groups, which are comprised of dimensional values. Okay. So if we look at this, for example, underneath company, you've got department groups, you've got location groups, event groups, which again used to be classes, employee groups, user groups, territory groups, etc. So if I wanted to create an event group of my, let's say, Cisco classes versus my Intacct classes, I could set those up and I could create that group. And again, groups are generally going to be used in things like general ledger reports, chart of account reports, more of your non-financial reporting as opposed to financial reports themselves. Okay, but you don't lose the power or the layout of the groups in your financial reports, because you can create dimensional structures based off of those groups. Okay, so let's take a look here real quick. Let's go back to company and let's go to department groups. And we don't have any, so I'm going to come in and I'm going to say these are my let's go down here. I'm going to pick a couple of things first just to be able to have some values, and I'm going to say equals, and of course it doesn't tell me what any of the department IDs are for. If you haven't done this before inside of Intacct, it's a really nice way of having multiple windows open. I just click in Firefox, I'm clicking on the lock that indicates it's a secure site, drag it over, and it puts me into another window, having open another session of Intacct here where I can go down to departments and I can look at my department names. So let's say, okay, good. I'm going to create a sales department. I'm going to call it sales, and I'm going to say where the department ID is equal to D310, or where the department ID equals D320. Okay, and I'm going to save that. And then I'm going to create another department group, and I'm going to call this, what else do we have over here? We have, okay, let's do support, and we're going to do 400, 200, and A500. Actually, we'll call it services, and we're going to say where department ID equals D400, I believe it was, right? D400, D200, and A500. D200 and department ID equals A500. Okay. So if I save this, then what I've created are two groupings of our department values, dimensional values grouped together. Okay. So we got those groups. If I come back over here now to the general ledger and I look at these different dimensional structures and I go to department, we don't have any. So I'm going to add one. I'm going to call it sales. And then display on report is sales, display total line is total sales. And again, I can either create a hierarchy of dimensional structures, or I can create department groups. So if I take my sales group and I add it and save it, and then if I take my support and here, and actually I called it services, so let's be consistent, we'll call it services. I'm going to add that, I'm going to add this. It already exists in the item structures. All right, so services department, and I'll just take that off the end, and oops, groups, save. Now the other thing to show you too is I can come in here and I can create sales and service if I wanted to see the total of those two, and then I could just utilize the sales department structure and the services department structure and save those. Okay. So what I've built here is the departmental report structures, one for sales and service, and one for the services department. Okay. Now, what I'm able to do at this point is if I go over to financial reports, and you can see I've got all these reports that are in here already. I've got balance sheets and expense summaries. Here's one expense summary by department. Here's one by location. Here's a P&L by department, P&L by location, etc. These are all in the system. Okay. A lot of these come with the system. A lot of these are custom built by the end user customer. But let's take a look, for example, at the expense summary by department. I'm going to go in and I'm going to edit this particular financial. Report information screen, this is all kind of locked down at this point. Not much you can really change. If we go to rows, you can see here that the account group that's been selected is the operating expenses. So we're looking at all of the different operating expenses of the organization. And then under columns, you can see that we've got the account name, and then we've got the departments here. Now, if I highlight this column and I scroll down just a little bit, you can see there's two things I want to show you here. One is dimensional structure, and notice that this is open, clear, there's nothing here, it's empty. And then expand by departments, all levels with roll up. So someone's come into here and said, look, I want to see all of my departments, all levels with roll up. So then it's going to give you a column for each of your different departments and the expenses associated. Okay. And then a total displayed on the right. So if we were to come in, and I'm going to do this as of 11/30/13, because that's kind of when the sample data is in here. And I'm actually going to make this current year just so we get good information. I'm going to save it. I may have to key that back in. I should have changed that and saved it first. Oh, okay. Don't you just love live demonstrations? Let me try to. Okay, let's try this again. If I go back to financial reports, I go back to edit. Okay. All right. Time Warner Cable, right? You got to love them. Let's see. So current year is there, the date's here. So I'm going to hit preview live report HTML. Location is required. Yes, 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 yes. All right, so we're going to have to run this one. All right, so I'm going to say save and done, and we'll just come back out here, and we will run the expense summary. And we will do it for the USA. So you can see here, we've got administrative, we've got development, we've got channel, direct, sales total, services, and all departments. Okay, I'm going to leave this up. I'm going to go back over here to where we were. I'm going to go back in and I'm going to edit this. I'm going to go to columns. I am going to pick my dimensional structure here of sales and service. And then I'm going to say expand by dimensional structure, all levels set. Okay. So I've just changed this and this inside of here. I'm going to hit save and done. And then I'll go back over to HTML. We're going to run this again. And I'm going to pick USA again. We're going to say OK. And notice now we've got sales and then total sales and service. Notice the numbers match, so apparently we have nothing in our service. Our sales have been through the roof. Our service department somehow has floundered and is not doing a thing for the company. So we'll have to address and we'll have to talk to them about that. But you see how using those structures, we've condensed what it is that we see inside the system. Okay. So that's part of what you can do. All right. I want to try adding one from scratch because I think it's one thing that a lot of folks don't normally think about. So let's do revenue by department. Actually, let's do gross margin by department. Demo would go a lot faster if I could type, but unfortunately you are stuck with that. I'm going to change this report structure to dimensions. I want you to watch this little diagram here. If I go to dimensions, notice how it changes. Customers, and then the customers are listed with revenue and expenses. Notice what happens if I check this box. Downtown, revenue, operating expense. West suburbs, revenue, operating expense, prior month, current year. I highly encourage you to play with this section. That is a technical term, obviously, play with the section. But I do encourage you to experiment here and see what it is that you can come up with. So not only can you have your accounts down the side, you can have your basically unlike Marie Antoinette, you can have your cake and eat it too here. You've got your customers down the side, you've got your accounts going across here in segments. You're really able to twist and turn and do a lot of things with Intacct financial reporting that you can't do with other systems because they don't allow you to break those dimensions apart, those segments apart into independent dimensions. So this kind of coming full circle again with what we talked about in the beginning is your ability to really pull these pieces apart and analyze them in many, many different ways. Okay. So I'm going to stick with this for right now. Actually, I'm going to come in here. I'm going to stick with this for right now. If I go to rows, I'm going to pick my dimension structure and I'm going to pick departments. And I'm going to pick my hierarchy here, include that in the report. So now we've got sales and we've got sales and service. Notice your little red area here. Account group, because we're telling this we want gross margins by department, we have to identify what account group constitutes our gross margin. And I know I'm kind of going through this a little bit quick. I'm not really trying to do this to really educate you on how to build the financials. This is really meant more to stir your mind and to get you thinking about what all of the possibilities are within Intacct. So we've identified our dimension group, we've identified our account group. I'm going to come here to columns, and notice here's your dimensional name, and then what do you want? You want current month, and then do you want to add a column to the right, and do you want current year? So you've got current month, current year. Okay. Our filters, and notice there's a values. If we go back, let me go back to columns. Notice it says values required. So look for the little red stuff. The little red stuff's really important. And if you try to save it and run it, and you don't have the red stuff filled in, it will tell you. Okay. So I'm going to default this to Qubit USA. All right. Actually, you know what? I'm not. I'm going to take this out to all locations, and I'm going to, that doesn't help me. All right. Sorry. Qubit USA. We'll leave that at accrual. Okay. And then here, I could pick, these are my filters. So I can pick any of these filters. I can hard code one by choosing it, or I can allow folks to prompt. So if I wanted to allow them to choose the line of business, if I wanted to allow them to choose the projects that were involved, the departments that were involved, I could do any of this. If I want to put a specific date, but then allow them to choose the reporting book, any of these things, I could set up as filters in the system. Not going to do a whole lot with formatting for this. Again, it's not an exact science of how to write a report, but I will show you underneath permissions, just as a reminder, you can have an access and an exclusion list for people, so that if you want to only allow certain individuals to get to certain reports. Okay. We've got preview mode, so we could do the preview. However, with our date, actually, let's see, because I did hard code one, perhaps we would be able to use this feature. Oh, and isn't that pretty? There's nothing there. All right, so let's do save and done, and let's run it the other way. And gross margin by department. So I'm going to come here to HTML. And we'll pick accrual, we'll pick our location. Don't really need to change anything. We're going to say okay here, and we get nothing. All right, so must be something inside the actual report itself. Let me just take a quick peek here. Rows, it's probably in the gross margin choice. So to get some data, let's come down here to net income. I know we said gross margin, but let's come down here to net income. And let's say that we save and done. And let's view the report. Okay. So there's sales, there's channel, there's direct for the year ending 12/31/13. No month to date. We ran it as 11/30, and there may not be any transactions in there for 11/30. But here's sales and service. You see sales, then channel and direct, and all the different totals. Okay. Okay. So, the key things to take away from this one would be the power of the dimensions and the ability of those dimensions to really transform the way that you report. And of course, we switch screens. So, and the summary recap here really quickly, we'll run through this. Why should you care about dimensions? They're independent objects. You're not tied into one long string in your chart of accounts. You can customize them, you can report on them, you can create groups and structures of them, and really use all of that to revolutionize your reporting. Customize your screens when you're entering those transactions. Use only what you need, and then that puts the control in your hands as far as how you are using the transactions, how you're keying in the dimensions within your different transactions. Using them in reports, columns, rows, and groups. Stay tuned. One of our next CloudBytes series is going to be on custom fields and how you can use those to really transform the way that you report within the system. And as promised, now our next CloudBytes session is going to be December the 16th at 2 o'clock. And it's going to be titled, "Hey, who changed my AR and AP windows? They look so nice." We like to have just a little bit of fun with it. We're going to send out invitations the week of December the 1st. The next CloudBytes session is going to be centered around the sweeping changes that are made in the next release of the software for the AR and the AP windows, and not only the windows, but the AP functionality. So you want to be sure to attend that session. They are going to change the way that AP works. They're going to change the way AP looks and the way AR looks within the system as well. So that'll be a nice CloudBytes session to have. And finally, I do want to thank you all for coming. I do appreciate your time and your attendance here. I am going to open it up. We've got a couple of folks still left. I'm going to open up here so that if you do have any questions, we can talk about those real quick. So does anybody have any questions? Your microphones are open. Okay. All right. Actually, I do see one question, or that maybe that looks like an old question. Okay. All right. So I do appreciate your time. Again, thank you for coming, and look for the invitation for the next one. I hope you did find this particular one to kind of stir your mind. Again, not meant to be a training session, more meant to be a thought-provoking session, but I really appreciate your attendance, and look forward to seeing you at the next one. Look for the invitations, and we'll tell you all about the new AR and AP transactions. So